I would like to welcome you all here, but also very excited for this next segment, which is a dynamic discussion with Ann Cramer and Bame Joyner, if they want to join me in the virtual main stage. So just to introduce everyone, I feel like these two distinguished guests don't need too much of an introduction. But as you know, Ann Cramer is a longtime devoted advocate of families and children, formerly of IBM, with a mathematics degree, but is just a huge advocate and steward for our innovation ecosystem and the community at large. Thank you, Ann, for joining us. And then Bame Joyner, who needs very little introduction, born and bred in Atlanta, co-founder of Atlanta Influences Everything and all-around curator. If you need any support on the larger innovation ecosystem with music and culture, he is your person. So thank you, Bame, for joining us as well. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion because we were discussing this in prep that, I don't think we've really had these types of discussions yet in the ecosystem, and especially putting two very dynamic forces into the ecosystem. But Clarence did a really good definition of what we think of social capital is. At the beginning in terms of the slides, and you can kind of see it through Kayla's chat on the side, but we define social capital as a power to utilize your network for good and to really harness that energy. But beyond the definitions, I want to ask both of you individually to tell me a time that you were recipient of social capital. And then on the flip side, tell me how you gave social capital away. We can talk about the definitions a lot, but ultimately tell me how you applied and benefited from social capital in a very concrete term for people to see. And why don't we start with you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. The age before beauty, right, Bame? So first of all, y'all are just kind of laughing and thinking, who is that old white lady who worked at a staid bureaucracy, IBM, for an arc of 46 years? She lives in the same house with the same spouse for 52 years in Little Five Points in Atlanta. Is she stuck, or is she stable or soaring? And so I think when you think about, then you have Bame, who is the innovator, lightning of all fabulous things that are going on here. And yet, I think what you'll find out, as Deborah has described, is how do we both love and live into the assets that we have. And some of us are blessed or privileged with more, and some make things out of what seems like little. And fortunately or unfortunately, I'm a very privileged white person, a white woman. That'll get to my second question, but the white woman part is that coming to Atlanta, I was blessed with what I like to call three amazing pillars. I came with IBM, and as a woman at IBM, there were not very many of us, and therefore I got access to a lot of places. Even though I was the only woman at the table, I still was at a table and able to participate. And because I cared about the community and was part of what was at the Junior League, which was a lot of the older, established white families in Atlanta who were doing marvelous things in community and started a lot of wonderful organizations, as well as part of a church, St. Luke's Episcopal Church in downtown Atlanta, which was and is very involved with social justice. And so those three pillars were my, as you would call them, access to not just social opportunities, but also to be involved and meet people across the way. And so consequently, I didn't even know what I was doing, but I became chairman of I was a president of the Junior League, was able to, with IBM, they needed someone to represent IBM at the table of United Way and the chamber, and to be able to have those relationships with then gave me a view of not only what issues were, because Jeff, my husband, and I lived in Little Five Points, where there was a lot of poverty, transitional wealth, integration occurring. We got to work we got to vote. We moved into Fulton County so we could vote for Andy Young for Congress. So we were always involved with the social justice. So seeing the needs first and front, and then having access to the privilege of the IBM and Junior League was how do I leverage that voice for good, which is social, which I think about when I talk about the whole idea of not just social justice, but networking. And then I think where I found I had to find a voice was that I, as a woman, for all of you Georgia Tech people, Governor Busby had to appoint public members to all the boards of registration. So because I was a math major, had a title as systems engineer at IBM, he appointed me to the board of registration of engineers. Y'all are laughing. This was in the 70s. When there, again, were not many women, much less people of color, being considered for PE or even EIT at the time, the engineering and training. And so they sort of sat me on the sideline. Who is this girl at the table? Because I wasn't an engineer. I just had a fun title. And I think it was then I realized that it's not always that you have to put yourself at the table. And one day I got to the meeting early, sat myself at the head of the table, and the guy said, "What are you doing there?" And I said, "Well, I'm at the table." And having that ability to make myself move, but then they didn't resist. And by golly, for 10 years, I chaired the board because I knew how to run a meeting and I could get things done, and they loved it. But the end of that, and this is where BAME comes in, is that for me, the idea is not where you sit, it's what are the foundational values on which you stand. And it's that consistent idea of how you can, quote, leverage, align, and use those assets. And for me, they are many. I am blessed. And yet it's not about me, it's where I can take those assets or privilege in ways that can affect change, social justice, and a life that we can bridge those economic immobilities for a long time. So stuck, maybe stubborn, stable, but soaring. BAME, you're on. Hi, I love this guy. He's the soaring.
Oh my God. Um, it's like, I mean, she needed to go first, but I don't know what to, you know. But what Ann did just now was help me kind of formulate, I guess, there's levels of different types of social capital. So kind of following along with Ann, I'm 45. I'm from Southwest Atlanta, West End to be exact. And the type of community that the West End, I grew up in a Victorian home. Janice White Sykes was part of a group of people that helped the neighborhood get on the National Register of Historic Places. So the look and feel of the neighborhood was protected. And it was a neighborhood that went through white flight, but there was a lady, Sharon Adams, guy Wade Burns, usually like white people that were like stalwarts in this community that was rapidly becoming Black, that was around the corner from the Atlanta University Center. So I had a tutor that went to Spelman. I had a mentor that went to Morehouse. My parents met. My mom was from Columbus, Georgia. My dad is from New Haven, Connecticut. That came to Atlanta in '73, following the news of Maynard Jackson becoming mayor. And Maynard made a call for more public kind of civil servants, and my parents were social workers. And I was born in Douglasville. I wasn't born at Grady Hospital. My mom wanted a natural birth, and while she was at Atlanta University, her and my dad were actually cool with Kanye West's parents, who Dr. Donda West was teacher at Morris Brown. She told my mom about a hospital in Douglasville that was doing natural births. So the early settings of social capital, as I'm setting the stage, are rooted in community for me. And the West End had like a lot of different types of Black people. It wasn't like one type. There's a Catholic church in the West End, but there was also a mosque a few blocks away, also Hebrew Israelites like a few blocks down the other way. Um, then you just had, I mean, it's a strip club not too far from that. You know, the hood is like little spots, you know, but it was a neighborhood, and folks communicated, and that base, that's where I learned like Kwanzaa and Kuji Chakalia, and supporting your community and picking up trash off the street, you know. And then I got a chance to participate in the Atlanta Public School M2M program, which put me in school in Buckhead. So I ended up early on in Ann's space without knowing Ann, but in the space that she described as a white woman. I got a chance to go to school with those children, you know, of people like Ann. And so playing in the sandbox, you know, elementary through high school. I came out of North Atlanta High School in '97. You're playing in this multicultural kind of United Colors of Benetton sandbox before the world starts to set in. And that social capital, that my base of social capital that I've used with the current mayor, kind of previous to, and just different. I've used at times where I've ended up at this country club called Piedmont Driving Club. I'm obviously not a member, but I have friends because Atlanta's small. But what allows me to set the base of my social capital is the communities that I've been able to maneuver organically. Became a Boy Scout, I'm an Eagle Scout. All of this kind of came from the mixing of communities that help develop the exposure and soft skills that I now use to the mayor to be like, well, I went to school in Buckhead, you know, still went to the West End, my hood pass still intact, but I went to school in Buckhead. These are my friends. These are my friends. All of these people are my friends, you know. So my social capital stems from organic friendships rooted in community. That was probably a long answer, but that's the base of it.
No, that's great. I love what you said. The last phrase is or social capital, or you know, based on community. And that's very much, I think, what Ann said as well. And so, you know, you both were, I think, very humbled in your nature, but you know, received social capital, but you maintained it because you proved yourself through your work, and through the value that you were able to contribute. But so for we have so many guests out here right now. You can kind of see all the pictures, and you know, they can all wave, and we have such a dynamic discussion on the chat box. So thank you very much. But so now that you are established innovators and leaders in your own right, I have seen time and time again some very public, some very quiet ways that you have been very generous with your social capital in the ecosystem and the community. So tell us how you think about now giving social capital that you were fortunate to get early on in your respective lives and careers. And, you know, for those that might be emerging innovators in their own right, what are some of the strategies that you think of that they can harness, and in terms of getting more social capital, like you have when you started in Atlanta?
So I'm going to go because this is one of my favorite questions. So thank you, Deborah. And BAME does this fabulously. Because I'm a math major, problem solving and connecting the dots are a part of how I think. And so consequently, even from the beginning, like we say from birth, is that you see what a need is and where a resource could be, and connecting. And to me, I think that's become sort of both the norm. It's both organizationally as well as people to people. And literally, I mean, many of you who know me well on this call are going to laugh. I take my little white piece of paper, write down after I meet with Deborah or BAME or Chad or whomever, and
lots of exclamation marks.
Exclamation points. And then before, I always deliver on my promise. And that's the part of the BAME, is that how I don't ever go to sleep at night until I have finished my connecting. And that is the Atlanta Way 2.0, is how we connect people to people who need to know each other for their own personal success. And then I back out, or organizations that have need, and you bring them to resources, not just funding, but board members and where people can serve. And I think the whole idea for me is the idea of connecting the people, the resource to need, and the opportunity for folks to soar, and always delivering on that promise. We always say presence alone, but showing up is good. It's participation and delivering that makes a difference. Oh, Bain. Oh, he's got a cop.
Bain?
And it's so
I've been at this, remember, twice your age.
and this is why the earlier part that Clarence was talking about, mentorship, like how you leverage social capital. And Ann is not like, we don't have an official mentorship thing, like a pattern. But if you show up enough and you lean in, people will lean back into you, and there'll be natural, sometimes unsaid mentorship. But yeah, you know, with that said, I came up, to Ann's point, I came up in the kind of Olympics outcast generation of Atlanta, and I'm the same age as the rap group, if y'all remember Crisscross and Jump. I was at Sutton Middle School. They was at the school bunch where the current mayor went, a few years older. But when they got discovered, before that, you didn't see Atlanta a lot on MTV or just on TV per se, besides like little kind of like Designing Women in the Heat of the Night, like certain little, but I didn't see myself, as Black represented as much on TV. But when I did, LA, New York, whatever, I didn't see Atlanta represented. And so when, and my barber was in the rap group Arrested Development. And so when you start to see, and this is still like early 90s Atlanta, and you start to see, and it's small Atlanta, and you start to see your peers like on TV in some form, where everybody, like, you might not know them, but you know their cousin or somebody. It's like, that's Atlanta, that community. And when you start to see that on the other side of the screen, it's like, wow. And so I knew I was never the talent. I'm shy, like rhythm is off. But like, I love the music. I love hip hop. I love Beat Street and breaking and graffiti and everything I saw coming out of New York. And I love the movie magic of Hollywood, but I also loved Atlanta. And I saw that we had talent early on, but we didn't have the infrastructure like those cities. And so I'm like, well, if we could just have the infrastructure, then we could just leverage our talent. And I never knew this to be an economic, like there was, when I was thinking like this, I didn't know, and I didn't know that Atlanta was #1 in income inequality. I knew I had an ego. I knew I had testosterone, sports, like I want to compete. I want to win, you know? And so I'm looking at, New York and LA, New York and LA. And I'm like, nah, Atlanta, but we need more executives. And so I learned of this guy, Clarence Avant. They call him the Black Godfather, who also, he's a music guy who helped Otis Redding, Ludacris, Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter. Like, his story is crazy. And so like these connectors that just help, when you take a step back, 3,000-foot view, how can you help the whole? But and my point in this for me is this guy, Clarence Avant, he started off in music and entertainment. But because of the actual influence of media and music and entertainment. You know, all these other sectors that you can work in or that make a city go round, if you actually have an ecosystem of influence from media, like a Ted Turner is like more of that intentionally, you can actually control how things go. So a guy who started in the music industry actually helped Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter become president, but he wasn't a politico. He was a creative dot connector, and he understood ecosystems. And so from there, we did Drake's first show in Atlanta. We did Kendrick. We just always trying to find a way. But I knew that in order for just out here trying to find a way, in order for the way that I wanted to become a legitimized way, I knew that I was going to have to get out and connect with others in the language that was said by Clarence at the beginning of this, of what PEN stands for. If someone like me can connect my, I guess, selfish ego agenda to this platform, then this way of life that I'm just been kind of flying by the seat of my pants, it can actually become a valid part of the ecosystem and at least play a role in helping Atlanta not be number one in income inequality. But I knew I needed to connect with great people. And so I needed to get out here and shake hands and kiss babies. And I appreciate this opportunity to tell my story.
Yeah, no, I'm actually thrilled that you, well, first of all, I love how you know, to put Jimmy Carter with Outkast and Clarence, all these names together. This is the ecosystem that we live in, right? And these are intentional collaborations that might not happen if it wasn't for people like you, Bane and Ann. We obviously talk a lot about the income inequality locally here, but also on a national level. But part of what we at the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation is trying to break through is, as much as there is an income inequality and financial capital, there's also a missing element, which is what we're honing in on, is social capital, right? What are those connections that you don't even know about or are missing, and how can we make sure that, you know, you are set up individually for success, but also as a community for success? Because that intangible know-how or that intangible network is ultimately important aspects to complement the financial capital and the larger income discussion that seldom gets put together. As Clarence noted, we are moving into our second session, which is basically a deeper dive into this. So the conversations are ongoing, and we are thrilled that each of you are staying on for our first breakout session that will allow for you each to lead a smaller group discussion under the umbrella of social capital. So, Anne, what is your topic and the breakout session so people are familiar with?
Great, thank you. And Deborah, thank you all for letting us come. I adore BAME, and we are connected. Mine is being the only one, and that is sort of like where and how you come in, and you might be the only woman, the only Black person, the only brown person, the only one at the table, and therefore how do you use that as an opportunity to leverage and use your social capital?
Wonderful, Anne. And BAME, what conversation are you going to be leading?
I skipped that part of the homework assignment. So like, I don't, it's,
I will say, like, whoever wants to join BAME
oh, I know, I got it.
Influence into affluence, yes. Making social capital work for you, you are welcome to join breakout room number 2 to translate that. How about that? I'll give you the pointer.
Hey, that's what I'm doing. I'm still figuring that out. I can't make any promises on this conversation.
No answers, just listen.
Yes. And then I'm pleased to also lead a breakout room with my partner in crime, Clan Angel, who is going to pop up soon, on, you know, how we really think about moving from a transactional relationship into a transformative relationship, into friendships. So Claire?
Absolutely. Super excited to lead this conversation with Deborah. We're going to talk about how we can continuously grow and learn through social capital. And I think another topic that Deborah and I will discuss is how also to leverage social capital to fail forward. So really excited to have that conversation, because I think we are always very eager to talk about our successes, but life is full of ups and downs. And so we'll also talk about the role of social capitals when not all is rosy.
Thank you, Claire. But before I turn it back to Clarence, I just want to give BAME and Ann a wholehearted appreciation and thanks. It was just as we were getting warmed up, and I know I could sit in the room and listen to BAME and Ann talk for a much longer time, especially in terms of their wisdom and their experience and honesty coming together. So thank you, Ann and BAME, but know that we will continue the conversation in this next session.